Most companies just don't know their call volume. They're not kind of measuring it. And call volume is tricky for people because sometimes they think that more calls means success. But if you're not meaningful, with knowing things like conversion, after call work times, speed of answer, handle times, that sort of thing, then all of those things, you're not reacting to the data, then it means nothing.
Welcome back to Pest Radio, the podcast where we talk with leaders shaping the future of pest control and wildlife industries, from business and growth to marketing, mindset, human resources, and the real stories behind the people in this field. I'm Faye Cebioglu, founder of Digital Karma. We help pest control and home service businesses grow faster by building systems that attract the right leads and convert them into customers. Our focus is simple: real growth, real numbers, and marketing you can actually trust. Today's guest is Margaret Garcia, the founder of Grit PPO, a female-owned, industry-specific outsourced customer experience partner that integrates directly into the daily operations of pest control, wildlife, and tree lawn companies. She brings a very unique perspective from deep inside the operational side of the pest control industry. Margaret spent over 15 years working at one of the top privately owned pest control companies in the Northeast, gaining hands-on experience in customer service, operations, and client experience and scale. So what makes her perspective especially valuable is that she's not just talking about customer service. She has built a system that plugs directly into multiple companies and operates as part of their team. So Margaret, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think your background gives you a very different lens on this industry. So let's start from the beginning. So you spent 15 plus years in a pest control company before founding Grit PPO. What originally brought you into the industry?
Well, I can tell you it was definitely not a love of bugs. It was that's most people's origin into it. It was honestly, I was looking for part-time work, and there was an opening for telemarketing, evening telemarketing, which worked really well as a stay-at-home mom. So I could be there with the kids during the day and then just be this, outbound dialer, calling people and getting hung up on, all night long. So that 4 to 8 was really what brought me to the pest control industry.
And when you look back at that early stage, what kept you in the industry for so long then?
It's definitely the people. It's always been the people. I was very fortunate to work for a company where, as big as they were, the owners were still very actively involved and had a lot of time invested in me and allowed me to be very creative with it. With anything that I did, I held many different positions over the course of 15 years. And there was nothing that I never had support with, doing something differently, trying something new. So I think that's really kind of what kept me there was, support and just the people.
And you work on the operational and customer service side. What did that environment teach you about how pest control companies actually grow?
Again, from the company that I was at, it was always about being innovative. It was always about trying something new and putting people first. All that was always ingrained in me was that this is, we're a people business. Lots of companies even say that now. And I understand it even more now than I did then. But it was always to put yourself, in your customer's shoes to solve the problem, right? And people still can have an ongoing pest issue and still not cancel their service as long as they feel like you're trying to solve the problem. So I learned very early on that it wasn't just about innovation, but it was also making sure that you were solving the problem for your customers.
When did you start seeing customer experience impact revenue or growth?
Early, from very, very early on. I moved from being a part-time telemarketer at night to being a customer service representative, and I worked for a tree and lawn department. And so the company that I was at, the owner was at the time, 15 plus years ago, so very actively involved in the tree and lawn routes. And as you can imagine, these are, a bunch of guys coming in the morning at 7 a.m. They're getting their paper because this was paper days. They were getting their routes with paper. And I mean, the owner would just, fascinate me because he would hand out everybody's route, but he would rummage through the tickets to see what customers were on each route. And he would say, Joe, make sure you blow all the material off of, Mrs. Garcia's walkway. She's always a stickler for looking at that when she comes home at night. And, Pete, make sure that with this customer, I mean, like very early on, it was ingrained that it was all about the customer experience and the way that he just knew his customers and not only just made sure that the technician was going there with a ticket, but here's like notes that weren't on the ticket. Here is just the how to make sure this client had a good experience with our service. It fascinated me.
No, it was the moment you decided to build Grit PPO.
Well, that was shortly. I was there for about 15 years and I wound up having my fifth child. And I just felt like I kind of had gotten to a place where, the owners at that time had rightfully so kind of removed themselves. The business was very successful, very growing. And so they weren't really kind of there day to day. And I felt like I had kind of plateaued. And honestly, I didn't have that, that inspiration, kind of there on a day to day. And it really kind of affected me in a way that, when I left, when I had my daughter, I just felt like it was time to kind of step away. But then it's like when this is all you've known and done for so long, it was like, well, I want to work for the pest industry, but I didn't want to start a pest control company, really. I didn't know if I wanted to go work for another one. I could have easily stayed where I was at, but I felt like there was, not a lot of room for growth when you are there that long and have done everything. And so I kind of felt like, why work for one when I could work for them all? Was the concept of Grit and, being this outsourced, call support service.
And what were the hardest parts of starting something in a very operational, high pressure industry like pest control? So when you start, do you feel like, okay, I'm ready, I can do everything, but I'm sure on the way you have, especially at the beginning, hurdles.
Yeah. I would say for starting kind of a company and coming into, this high pressure, kind of environment, it was more also the growth with Grit, like hiring, my first and my second and my third employees that, when it comes to taking phone calls and handling calls, I mean, the client experience has always been everything to me. And so how do I take my passion for that and, and kind of put it into someone else? And when it comes to handling their calls for new business, I mean, the training is super important. And you only get one chance at a great first impression on these calls. So the learning curve with new people, you can't practice on new business. That was the hardest part of it.
So in a simple way, how would you describe Grit PPO in the simplest way possible?
Oh gosh, like 8 years later into this, I would say the simplest thing is that we answer calls the right way. That would be the simplest way to explain it.
Okay, when a pest control company works with you, what parts of the customer journey are you actually handling? Only the calls that they are receiving or any other services are you providing for pest control companies?
We're touching the customer at every point. The first time that they call in, we don't work with APIs or integrations. We log right into the CRMs. So we are proficient in like 10 different pest control softwares. And so we help the customers in their environment. And, we're taking everything from new business to sending out agreements to solidifying sales to scheduling. We handle the web leads that come in, and live chats. So we're pretty much involved in the entire client interaction.
So it's like you are like working in-house, but you're not in-house.
Right. The concept is that we're handling everything that, that another company's CSR can do. The only difference is geography, and customers don't hear that over the phone.
And what does good customer experience actually mean in your system on a call level?
So good customer service for us would be, just being effective, right? That's the biggest thing. You want to have effective, meaningful interactions with customers.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's what it kind of looks like beyond answering the call. There's a purpose and intent to every interaction that we have in a way that it's meant to be effective and meaningful.
I know you also provide trainings. And how does that connect to your day-to-day service delivery?
I mean, training is everything, right? So without it, it's just, chaos. So we're constantly training. We basically started to evolve into offering it to other companies because we had the companies that we were taking call support services for come to me and say, hey, can you train my team to sound like your team?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm very, very methodical, like I said, in the client interaction. Having a system in place for how you answer the phone is crucial. So that's kind of really where the training came from. So we help other companies to kind of build those streamlined processes and teach their CSRs how to feel like they're in control, having effective, meaningful conversations.
So can you give us a sense of the range of the companies you work with? So what kind of companies are you working with now? And are they mostly small businesses with sized companies or larger multi-location operations?
There's a big healthy mix. We work with small to medium sized companies. We work with, one man bands, and larger companies that have different locations and are very high volume. So our heart is always with, I say, like with the smaller to, mid-sized companies, just primarily because you can help them make such an impact, that they could not have to hire and grow their team, but still, kind of scale. And then we've worked with larger companies and have helped them scale, very quickly because anytime I feel like companies are very focused on having great client experiences, we just fit in no matter what size you are.
So if I open if I found a pest control company tomorrow as a one-man show, one technician, so
hmm
can I afford your services?
I would say, how can you afford not to?
Why?
That,
Okay.
I mean, it's like that's really kind of the answer because, if you're a single person or in a single tech, how quickly are you at getting to a phone when you're in the middle of a crawl space?
Mhm.
And especially when you're paying marketing and you're paying for the phone to ring, it's got to get answered. So, and not only does it got to get answered, but you want to be able to solve that customer's problem, not say, let me call you back. So, I mean, that's really kind of the difference.
And speed is very important, right?
Speed is very important, but more importantly, that you're able to answer the phone and, help them with their problem. When people are calling with a problem, they want to be met with a solution.
Why is call volume such a misunderstood metric in this industry?
It's not misunderstood, it's like unknown. I would say most companies just don't know their call volume. They're not kind of measuring it. And call volume is tricky for people because sometimes they think that more calls means success. But if you're not meaningful, with knowing things like conversion, after call work times, speed of answer, handle times, that sort of thing, then all of those things you're not reacting to the data, then it means nothing. So I think that's the issue. Either companies don't know their volume and don't really know what's kind of pointing at them, or they don't know what to do with the information and how to respond to it and how to react to it.
When you onboard a new company, what is the biggest gap you usually see in their expectations or data?
Well, there's two things. The gaps that we usually see are usually that companies don't know their metrics. So, they're coming on to us thinking, okay, you're just going to get like, these few calls or these few scenarios, and that's never what happens. You open up the phones and it's always the complete opposite. And we usually see a lot of like tribal knowledge. Not a lot of like written SOPs on what to do for things, and that's what we kind of thrive on. So a lot of times when we're doing that onboarding, we're helping them build those scenarios, build those SOPs and those processes for certain scenarios because we know all the ones that we're gonna be exposed to.
So you're working with different companies. How do you integrate into different companies while keeping their brand voice consistent? Because every company is different. Every company's service range is different. So is it going to be one person dedicated to that specific company or same telemarketing person or customer service person can work with different companies at the same time?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much just everybody is all hands on deck. Everybody's completely cross trained in every company and every software. And so we just, we act like an extension of their team, and that's really the key to it. It's just being able to help the customer that allows us to keep their brand voice consistent. Pest control is the same across all the companies. And unfortunately, people might think that they're unique in certain ways, but there's still a main, core foundation and service that they're providing that allows us to just understand what the customer's need is. Everything beyond that is just personality, right? Tonality, being somebody who just sounds like you want to help and being somebody that's just pleasant to talk to. So it makes it easy to represent their brand.
So you mentioned being involved in the day-to-day operation. So how is the reporting? Like, is it day-to-day or monthly reporting or end of day reporting? And why is that so important how you do it?
It's not so we provide access to what we call our partner portal.
Hmm.
And that's like full transparency on the details of the campaign itself, on the call handling, what we're closing, what we're not closing, why we're not closing it, and all of that. There's your basics, there's your time of day, and there's your days of the week. But there's a lot of effort that's going into the data that we're showing owners so that they can make strategic business decisions, but also with us. So when we say we're involved in the day-to-day operations, that's the part that I think makes us truly unique, is that we want to be a part of it day to day. I don't want to meet with you at the end of the month and talk about all the things that we didn't close or talk about appointments that weren't booked incorrectly. Problems don't show up at the end of the month. They show up call to call. So we want to be able to get on a call immediately if something happens, just like you would to a CSR next door to you, right? You'd say, hey, Faye, can you pull up this account? And it's that kind of camaraderie and collaboration that I think makes us unique.
What kind of a pricing model you have? So also, can you explain how that works in a simple way?
Yeah, the easiest way that I explain it is it's like a Boost mobile phone. So people, prepay for a bucket of minutes, and that usually correlates to their call volume. It's okay if people don't know it at first because we give lots of metrics. I'm big on data, so we're going to show you where you line up. And so that's what they do. They prepay for a package of minutes, and we're only utilizing those minutes when we're on the call, speaking to a customer. So if it takes us all month to utilize those minutes, somebody's logged in for, hours and hours a day, and you're only using those minutes when we're on a call.
So from your experience, do you think pest control companies fully understand the value of customer experience today, and where do they still get it wrong?
I feel like they do. I just think that they underestimate how much, revenue is connected to customer service. I think that would be the best way to put it. I think everybody understands
Or
the
maybe
value
they
in
don't
it.
know. Can we say that?
Maybe they don't know. But I think everybody knows that customer service is key. I think that they don't realize that, the joke that I always say is that the phones are the cash register of the pest control industry. I think that they underestimate how much of it is tied to the phones. Because we know that, customer service is valuable because it's a home service business. We know that we teach technicians, or I should say but pest control companies, right, teach technicians, bring the newspaper in, bring the garbage up, take down the Christmas lights when you're in the attic. So they know the value in it. But I think it's taking that same understanding and realizing that it's all coming and starting from, the phone system, the CSRs that are on the phone.
Yeah. But from what you have seen, what part of the customer journey is still most under-optimized in the industry?
Yeah, still the phones. It's still, not focusing enough attention sometimes and training, to the customer service reps that are on the phones. It's also even, the follow-up calls after the service. Companies, focus a lot on getting the job booked, but then kind of, sometimes drop the ball or put that on the back burner of nurturing the relationship after the technician has left with a phone call, for various different reasons. Upgrading the account from a one-time to an ongoing, or just checking in and saying, how did it go? Can I just ask you about your experience?
Yeah, converting one-time job to a recurring customer, or maybe do you also perform cross-selling for your customers?
Yeah, we do outbound dialing efforts, for all of the companies that we work with, retention calls, cross-selling, GPC customers that don't have tick and mosquito and vice versa, and so on and so forth.
So what does scalability look like for a pest control company using your system?
I think it's very easy. We're kind of a plug and play. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time explaining to us why certain scenarios require inspections or why you want to do certain things with customers. We get it very easily. So, onboarding happens very quickly. It's not a lot of, explaining the whys. We get the whys. We just need to know what to do with certain scenarios.
Because you have a niche, and it's easier for you to understand when there's a new company, there's a new onboarding with a new company. And I get the idea, because we, as an agency, we also niche down to only pest control companies. So when there's an onboarding going, I think it's the same with you. It's easier to understand, easier to reply, easier to communicate.
Yeah, 100%. I think that sometimes we're on an onboarding call and somebody's spending an elongated amount of time explaining to me why, German roaches should be inspected or rats. And we're like, we know. I know. It's either material or kerosene in a lighted match. I get it. Yeah.
Okay, I have some personal questions. I know you're working with your husband, Ruben, and we met with him on Legislative Day. So what is it like building and running a company with your husband, and how do you divide roles?
I think we do a good job of staying in our lane, but at the same time, we communicate and like collaborate on just about like everything. I think it's fun working with family because I remember, being at work and coming home and trying to like express a frustration or a scenario that happened at work. And, they just kind of listen and nod politely. And now it's a little bit different. Now you're here, you feel it, you get it. So I think there's that added advantage of being able to relate. And then just also, it's fun. It's fun to get to see the people that you love every day.
So, how that change your perspective on work-life balance, being an entrepreneurship, working with your husband, so you're working, and is it like this? Your, personal time at the weekends? What kind of balance you have?
No balance. I'm definitely not the one to give advice on this. I am the worst person to give advice on this topic. I think that it's definitely not balanced. I would say, if anything, maybe it's blended, right? Maybe, I blended by meaning like sometimes like work is taking a lot of my time, and sometimes, I make sure that I focus on home and, don't focus so much on work. So I would say it's blended. I've stopped trying to perfect that, that balance. I would fail every time.
By the way, if you're an entrepreneur, I don't believe in that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't believe in that.
Exactly. If I'm hanging out at home doing something, I'm like, I should be looking up some type of software or something, shouldn't I? This doesn't feel right.
I hear
Yeah.
you. I don't believe in that. There's no work and, personal life balance if you're running your own company,
Yeah.
because your mind is always there. If it is good, if block your times for some specific, personal thing, or, concentrate on one specific project. But normally I don't believe in that.
Yeah. My best advice for that is, treat your calendar. I put my home stuff in my calendar, and for whatever reason, it helps to balance it out. If I put it on my calendar, I definitely make time for it. So it could be anything from, doing stuff at home to cooking a certain meal to going a certain place. If I lock it in there, it usually happens.
So, everything changed very fast, not only in pest control industry, but 21st century. So where do you see pest control customer experience evolving in the next 3 to 5 years? Because, AI is here, these all AI agents, people are using. Today, I had a call from my customer. He's just trying by himself, buying an AI voice agent, and asked me to call the number and, ask me what I think about it. So how do you see it?
Yeah. It's hard to even think 3 to 5 years because so much changes. I mean, even in the last 6 months with technology. So, it's hard to even think, gosh, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But I definitely, obviously, more AI, but I still don't think that that means less people. I think that companies will learn how to, gosh, I mean, like, I used to sit here for hours, 10 plus years ago trying to make quizzes for training, and now I can do it with the push of a button.
Mhm.
So when you think about, the access to technology, I think that it's going to be more AI, more ways of bringing those things into your day to day to make you work, smarter, not harder, like anything else. But I also think from perspective of the customer experience, I think that we're going to see, a difference even in the way that we hire CSRs. I feel like, I think I talked about this recently, with AI agents, right, taking the easier calls, right, those kind of what I used to say for CSRs were the relief calls, the dopamine hits. Like, somebody calls in with something very simplistic, like, it helps us to release some of that cognitive load. You're happy to talk to a customer who wants an appointment 2 months out. You're like, oh, thank God. Yes, I can give you whatever you want if that's what you're looking for. So as those easier calls, right, are getting removed, what CSRs are left with is the higher cognitive load ones, the calls that take more, energy out of us. So I think that we're going to have to, think about how are we training, making sure that people are set up for success in that way.
So we are using a lot of AI in our company, but when somebody is asking me, are you using AI? Of course, everybody is using AI, and we have been using AI more than, 5 years. And now it's very
Mm-hmm.
popular with ChatGPT, cloud.
Sure.
But I also tell people that authenticity, being real, is also as much popular as, AI. So the
Mm-hmm.
human communication.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that you're going to have that, there's still people that are going to want to process really easy interactions through an AI, but for the more complex things, they're still going to want people. And if our people are now handling, the more complex things, then we have to think about, that person in that seat. because it's not as easy as it was anymore.
And from your perspective, working with multiple companies, what is the most common mistake you see pest control owners make in customer experience?
Same, not the training, not putting the time into the training, or thinking that training only happens once, and you don't have to repeat it again. So I think it's something that you do during onboarding, and then it continues, month after month. It continues when the pest season changes. It continues when the call scenarios change. So just not making that kind of investment. I think there's still a lot of companies that just consider the CSRs in the office admin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's much more than that.
And what separates companies that scale smoothly from, that struggle operational?
Systems, right? Systems. You absolutely have to have a system. It's not people, because people execute systems. So when there's a lack of systems, I think that's what the struggle is.
And looking back at your 15 plus years in the industry and now building Grit PPO, what are you most proud of?
That's tough. No, it's not tough, actually. I mean, like anytime you take something from an idea and turn it into something that works, right? You're proud of it all. I would say I'm most honestly proud of my team. My team, not only the team that I have now, but the team that I had at the company that I worked for. I'm a big proponent of systems and processes, and people just execute. And I was always proud of the way that they, stepped up to execute.
And what part of your work excites you most right now?
The same with technology. Like I said, the fact that it doesn't take me hours to make a quiz, to see where things can go with technology and the way that we do things currently, I'm always looking for something that improves the process and makes it faster. So that's what's really exciting right now about being, I think, in any industry, in any business.
And what does success look like for you today?
Continuing to scale without chaos.
Yeah.
I think we've got the systems in place. So that's most successful is where we're at now. We're very clear on what success looks like in our client relationships and in our processes. So it's very exciting to be us right now.
It's a great addition without chaos.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I always love asking fellow entrepreneurs just because, we all go through the same roller coaster, ups, downs, challenges and wins. And what has your journey been like as an entrepreneur? And for those thinking about starting their own business, what advice would you give looking back? What are some things that worked really well for you? And what are some things that did not?
There are lots of both of those things. I would just say honestly, like if you're starting something, I would say focus more on, being useful, and solving a problem than trying to be everything for everyone. I think that's how we started out, trying to be everything for everyone. And I think those were some of the fails, not that we couldn't, but when you're trying to kind of, scale and grow, it's very hard to be everything. So I think, if you're trying to solve a problem, then don't be everything for everyone, because that's not going to allow you to get really good at something.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing your perspective. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that customer service isn't just a support function. It's directly tied to growth and revenue. And the way you have, built Grit PPO to truly integrate into operations is something a lot of companies can learn from. And really appreciate of being such a real and practical perspective to the conversation. And for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.